All right, welcome to another big schmooze, everybody. I know we have real things planned here, but I don't know, Will, if you keep up on the latest Oscar movies. Do you watch like the ones that have the buzz as we get into Oscar season?
I had considered seeing that. What is it? The Old Man and the Crane, the crane, the heron, um,
Or The Boy and the Heron?
the boy and the heron. That's it. Yeah, I was thinking about seeing that, but they don't have subtitles for that in English, so I don't know if I would really quite fully appreciate the film if I don't know what's
What?
going on.
You don't want to hear the beautiful Robert Pattinson dub?
I mean, I would if I could find it, but yeah, no, I refuse to watch it I would like to watch it in the original language as a purist, for Oscar sanctity.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much always anti-dub because for one, they're just not that like the dubs. They're fine, I guess, but like they sound condescending to me. Every dub I've ever heard.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like between the lines, literally between the lines, they're sort of saying, you're too stupid to read, and I really, I can read sufficiently, so I think I can handle myself.
Yeah. Our the person we both know, Remy. He's a huge Akira fan, and I had not seen it on my own. I don't really seek that particular genre out that often, but he was like, "You got to watch Akira," and I thought, well, like that is it's a movie that is lauded by a lot of people, so I thought, sure, let's watch it. And so he turned it on. He turns on the dub, and we're watching the dub. And I'm like, is it possible that we could just like this is one of your favorite movies? Presumably, you sort of know what happens. You get the gist of what they're saying. What if we switch to the sub version? And he says, I don't read fast enough for that.
He doesn't. Well, I mean, the thing is, you do have to speed read, which is the thing. So I get the people might be turned off by that, but you know, most of the conversation kind of goes at a decent pace. So unless you're watching something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they're all talking like 1,000 miles a minute, you don't really have to read too fast. I would I would
Yeah,
argue, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends on too your level of intoxication while watching the film. Maybe
I
could play
suppose.
a role.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know if you're familiar with one of the Oscar movies this year from a man who seems maybe more desperate to get an Oscar than anybody else currently in the running. Bradley Cooper's Maestro. You know anything about this?
Yeah, the movie with the prosthetic nose, as I
Yeah.
also know it by. Yes.
Well, yeah. So what was funny about that, in case anyone doesn't follow stupid news like Will and I do, is so Bradley Cooper's making this biopic about Leonard Bernstein. And let me just ask you, Will, would you say that you know what Leonard Bernstein's nose looks like off the top of your head?
To be honest, Tom, I don't even know what he looks like to begin with. So he could have a huge nose, a small nose, a shrunken nose, a regular nose.
An
Like I
inverted
don't think
nose?
yeah, an inverted nose. No, most people don't really know. Most people don't memorize celebrities' noses that well, I would say, as a general rule.
Well, like there are celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, who I think probably everybody basically knows what she looked like. Leonard Bernstein, I wouldn't really put on that list. So it was funny to me because if you look at pictures of Leonard Bernstein, he does kind of look like Bradley Cooper. And his nose is not big. And so in the makeup that they put on Bradley Cooper, who directed this movie as well, decided that he needs a big, like a kind of unusually large nose to play this prominent Jewish conductor. And I think rightfully people were sort of like, I don't know that I would have watched this movie and said, I don't think his nose was big enough. Right? Like, what really took me out of the movie?
Yeah,
He didn't have a huge nose like Leonard Bernstein didn't have.
right. It's not realistic enough because the nose isn't big. Again, that's nobody's takeaway. I don't think.
So the movie, I try to see most of the big contenders. I'm always at least a little bit curious. This one happened to drop on Netflix last night, and so I turn on Maestro. I don't think I'd seen a trailer or anything, and I hate to be that guy who like picks on movies that are passion projects for people because it takes a lot of work to make a movie, and generally, if there's at least some degree of passion behind it, I try not to be that bully who's like, the thing you just spent 3 years of your life on sucked. Sorry. Um, but Maestro, somebody tweeted this morning a thought that I think basically encapsulates the general feeling I had and what really irritated me about it, which is somebody said, this is not a movie about Leonard Bernstein. It's a movie about Bradley Cooper playing Leonard Bernstein. And
Mm,
it's he's just buried in makeup. He looks like Sean Penn with a huge nose. Um, he's doing
yeah,
this like higher. He's trying to sound like Leonard Bernstein, which again, people don't know what Leonard Bernstein sounded like really. Right? Like maybe you've heard a couple recordings of him. Again though, like so
maybe.
he's doing this higher voice. He's talking very nasally. He's like I can't even quite get in the nasally way that he's doing it, but he just doesn't. He just sounds like a guy who doesn't sound like Bradley Cooper. He's not, like what it made me think was, and you probably have more experience in this than I do, but like in early acting classes or like actors training, one of the things that they try to really get out of you is you need to make a lot of choices, right? Like you can't just go in there and not make choices. And I think that what a lot of prominent actors do is maybe they start there, but what they might say is the great performance is when you are making a lot of choices, but the audience doesn't necessarily see every single choice you're making because you're putting so much emphasis on them. Am I characterizing acting correctly?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you want it to be like not noticeably cartoonish, I guess would be would be how I would say it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bradley Cooper's not quite. Well, the funny thing is, I don't think Bradley Cooper's a bad actor. I've liked him in a handful of movies. Like he's funny. I think his comfortable space where he really disappears into a role is when he's just playing a jerk, and he's good at that.
Yeah.
Like Hangover movies, he's funny in those. Wedding Crashers, he's funny in that. Even Licorice Pizza,
Perfect.
good performance there.
Perfect. Yeah. Typecast as sort of the guy who's a jerk for some reason.
Well,
Um,
he's good at it.
yeah, yeah. No, and I mean he plays like simultaneously a hateable but also kind of funny, charismatic sort of bully dude.
Yes.
So it's not even a role to be typecast into necessarily. But based on what you're telling me, and based on the I don't know 3 minutes of or less, probably probably like a minute of trailer that I've seen for this movie, and the article that I read about the fake gigantic nose, I would sort of assume that watching this movie is sort of like watching Bradley Cooper in a ton of makeup, sort of being the most obnoxious human that you could probably imagine for like 2 hours. And then
Yeah,
you're like, oh, I guess that was what Leonard Bernstein was like, I suppose. I mean, I don't really know.
I
And then it's
learned
sort of like,
nothing
yeah,
about Leonard Bernstein from this movie.
it's a
He
shame.
I guess he conducted music, and then the funniest part. So, okay, most of the movie it barely has a narrative arc at all. Like the kind of through line is that I guess Leonard Bernstein was bisexual or closeted and had a wife, and they barely get into the drama of that, but it allows him to be, to have these sort of male lovers in some scenes and have these marital dramatic tensions in these others. And it doesn't really build off of that. It's just kind of awkward for everybody as we see it happening. And it just feels so carefully designed to give him all like it's this checklist of things that people have won Oscars for before, which is like
Mm.
marital tension, potentially ambiguous sexuality, a lot of makeup, a voice that sounds nothing like the actor, a lot of acting, as much acting as you can fit into the frame. And it felt like that was how the scenes were constructed, not like drama or story.
Featuring somebody who throws something that breaks loudly during an argument.
Yes,
It's
ugly crying.
wow, that's yeah, lots of both characters arguing and then crying.
Yes.
Crying by themselves, crying with a second rate character. Yeah, that's it. Kind of just seemed like he wanted to go full Christian Bale, but I don't know if I don't know if my boy Bradley really has the acting chops to necessarily pull that off. Nothing against him, but not everyone's a Christian Bale. I mean, you can't just put
Yeah.
on a bald cap and gain 50 pounds eating pies and just become Dick Cheney. Like it's a very specific type of person to do that.
Well, that's a good point. When I watched Vice, somehow I didn't feel that distracted by it being Christian Bale. Maybe for the first 5 minutes, right? As you're sort of acclimating, but
You're like, wow, yeah, yeah. But then after
um,
that, it's like that's probably, I mean, from what I've seen on TV, that's basically Dick Cheney.
right. Well, even that again, I think you can take aside the fact that, like, I know I'm watching a movie. It's all fake. Like, you don't have to be exactly the same as the real person. It's okay if you're going
Yeah,
to. Like,
it's true.
I'm not worried about like Dick Cheney. I'll say this: watching Dick Cheney for 2 hours would almost certainly be more boring than watching Dick Cheney as filtered through Christian Bale.
Right, yeah. But I mean, that's part of that's it's sort of like artistic liberties. No one's going to be like, well, that's not exactly how they looked or sounded.
Right.
It's sort of like you're doing an impression of somebody.
Yes.
It's not supposed to be the exact same thing. It's just supposed to sort of be like an approximation to the point where you get something across. But that's that's very funny that they did all this elaborate makeup work, and Bradley Cooper apparently just sort of tried to inhabit this Leonard Bernstein, like not even character, just become Leonard Bernstein.
Well, yeah,
But then they don't even do anything with it. That sounds
yeah.
kind of a bit disappointing.
Well, my least charitable observation as I'm watching this is the scenes where he's actually conducting. I've never watched a lot. I've maybe played a YouTube video of Leonard Bernstein here and there, but like I'm not intently watching Leonard Bernstein's face while he conducts. But Bradley Cooper's so into it. He's just flailing his arms around, he's flailing his head all over the place. But if you watch this face, he's making this like he's got his mouth open and kind of this awe, this catharsis, this almost childlike joy. And I'm watching him make this dopey face the whole time. And think like, what does this remind me of? Like, what am I thinking of? And I finally realized what it made me think of, and what it kind of looked like was Simple Jack running through the field with his big his bubble catcher thing.
Oh my God. Not Simple Jack. Oh man. That's so that's so funny, but also kind of like that's the best face he could come up with. Like really? Like that's
Yeah, I was
like
desperately trying to find a clip or find an
oh
image to bring up. It just came out on Netflix, so there's nothing really out there except the official images. And thankfully, somebody at Netflix was sort of like, "Yeah, we're not putting clips of that in the trailers, guys."
that's yet another missed opportunity because that would be the scene where you would actually have him sort of that's okay, yes, he's an artist, he's tortured, he's got a weird life, he's got a unique set of circumstances going on in his personal life, but then he doesn't have like that sort of moment where it's like, well, I guess all this is somewhat justified because they're an artist, they at the end of the day they make good art. It's just sort of him just mouth half open, sort of like an empty sort of look on his face. I mean, yeah, he's probably trying to be like, wow, this is, I'm being moved by this movie, but like it just doesn't sound like it doesn't even sound like he nailed that. And that's really the one thing that he would have had to do for it to be
Yes.
good. And instead, he turns it into sort of Simple Jack. And that's,
Yeah.
wow.
The
I
the
mean,
whole thing.
and if that's the most charitable thing you could say about it, really, uh, I don't think it's going to win much. But then again, I could be
Well,
wrong.
that's the thing. I mean, like, I'm not going to discount the fact that it could work, right? Because the Academy's stupid. They give all kinds of dumb movies awards. So
That
he
is
might
true.
he might have perfectly calculated how to manipulate these people because he does have the checklist, and they do love these impressions of real people over anybody who
Yeah.
constructs a fictional complex performance.
Yeah, they do love the like, I'm going to be this is a docu series about Gary Busey, and it's like it wins an Oscar, and you're like, really? I mean, it's yeah, because it's based on a real guy. It's like, yeah, I know, but it doesn't. We don't need to make movies about real people if they're already famous.
Well, it's
Which
like
I guess
Gary
I don't know.
Oldman, right? He's been one of the most versatile, interesting actors his whole career for 30 years. He finally just puts on a fat suit and plays Winston Churchill, and that's what wins him the award.
I think that's the part that Bradley Cooper overlooked. He should have picked a fat guy. You know what I mean? The nose prosthetics, the goofy clownish makeup, the like over the top squeaky nasally voice. Might get it, but I'm telling you, if he had picked a fatter man and he had sort of worn a fat suit, that seems to be the perfectly calculated algorithm for success. And I think
It would have been great.
he might have overshot it.
Imagine if he had said, "My next movie, which I am desperate to win the best actor Oscar for, is going to be a biopic about Paul Giamatti," and he dresses up like Paul Giamatti. He's got the like not even that fat, but like the guy who's just been out of shape his whole life suit.
Right.
Shaves his head. He's got the little mustache goatee, and then he gets nominated alongside Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, and they're both at the Oscars watching these clips. And so you're watching like footage of Paul Giamatti watching Bradley Cooper playing Paul Giamatti in this Oscar bait movie.
Now that would be great. I would love because I'm sure Paul Giamatti would have some looks on his face. The real Paul Giamatti, of course, would have some pretty interesting looks on his face as he's sort of watching somebody pretend to be him.
Yeah. We got
I would love to see that.
It's a clip of Bradley Cooper in that part in Sideways, and now it's Bradley Cooper just doing this kind of grating Paul Giamatti voice, and he's like, "I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot." Then they cut to real Paul just like frowning in the audience,
frowning and sort of nodding his head slowly, and a no, this is not working. His hand sort of goes up to his forehead, like, my God.
And then Bradley Cooper wins the Oscar for it. Then you just see Paul Giamatti again, just kind of shaking his head.
Yeah. And then he gives the Oscar speech. Like, thank you to the Academy for this opportunity. Thank you to God. Thank you to my parents, my dog. And thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul Giamatti, for being a human being that's alive, that's fat. And then Paul Giamatti's he stands up and walks around, turns around, just walks out of the theater. It's like, I'm done.
Thank you, Paul, for being so brave and fat and ugly and bald. And all the things I need to win an Oscar.
Thank you, Paul, for living your truth, not getting a hair transplant, not ever losing weight and getting in shape, for just being cantankerous all the time, and generally probably not that much fun to be around. I mean, your personality, as brave as it is the template for how to win a good Oscar. And so for that, we thank you. Oh man, that would probably get more Oscar views than The Slap. Maybe they got a one up for The Slap. Was that last year or the year before? I don't remember.
I think that was the year. Right? I think it was the year before.
I don't know.
But
okay.
Yeah. I mean,
nobody's talked about the Oscars since, so we gotta do something here.
Yeah,
they gotta
right.
think of something.
We need Bradley Cooper to still be in character. Like it's like he got stuck as Paul Giamatti, so he's winning the Oscar while still dressed up as Paul, sounding like Paul. And then we need Paul Giamatti to go up and basically fight him. So we have two Paul Giamattis in a fight, except one is Bradley Cooper, who is actually in shape, but just likes to look fat for the movies.
You see Paul, the real Paul Giamatti, just sort of like beating up the sort of Bradley Cooper Paul Giamatti, and then he starts ripping off the fat prosthetics. You just see a fake jiggly silicone pair of like fat man titties just flying across the room. You see sort of a prosthetic beer gut just being launched across the other side of the room. All the celebrities are sort of horrified.
Yeah.
Amy Schumer tweets that she's never felt more threatened in her life. I mean, that would be perfect.
It looks like a zombie movie where he's just like ripping into Bradley Cooper's torso.
He's like, and by the way, my nose isn't that fucking big. And he rips off the prosthetic. Bradley Cooper just becomes addicted to playing characters with huge noses.
Well, yeah,
like, hey, we're doing the Adam Driver. We're doing the Adam Driver biopic next.
I think it'd be funnier if he keeps picking real life people who didn't have big noses, but when he plays them, he insists that they have this massive nose.
Oh, that would be funny. He's like, no, we need to do a biopic about Harvey Weinstein. What a monster that guy was. What a humongous fucking schnoz that guy had. It's like, but nobody said that about Harvey. Yeah, but I feel like people won't know who it is unless I have a big nose. It's like, well, no, I don't feel like anyone will have that problem. Yeah, but it just seems like if we want to get the Oscar, the prosthetics are important. It's like, well, I guess I can't argue with you there,
Yeah,
Brad.
like he's using. I see how he got there, right? Like I get the logic he's using,
Yeah,
and again, it might work, but man, it's not fun to watch.
it sounds like it's several things. It sounds like it's not fun to watch. It sounds like it's incredibly offensive because it's stereotype. It sounds like it might win an Oscar, but it also sounds like the movie's boring. So I don't
Yes,
know.
yes.
I I don't know, man. Maybe it is the right calculation. So
You know,
it'd be interesting to see if it wins anything.
what it reminded me of was, have you ever had like a friend who either wrote or is like maybe wrote and is starring or is just starring in like a play, and they're so sure both that the play is amazing and that they're great in it, and so you go see it to be supportive, and it you can tell 5 minutes in like this is bad and they're bad in it, and I will never be able to mention this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, this is terrible, but I should probably keep it to myself.
Yeah. So you
You
sit there
know,
for
and then when
two
they're
and a half hours
yeah,
just in like in shame for them because they don't have any.
yeah, secondhand embarrassment the entire time. Then they come up to you afterwards. They're like, "So what did you think?" And you're like, great. It was great. I mean, I don't know what everyone else has been telling you, but it
Yeah.
works." And then
Bradley,
you just sort of gotta,
you really sounded like you
yeah.
had a bad cold for 2 hours.
Bradley, I don't know what the hell the real Leonard Bernstein sounded like because most people don't. Um, but I'm sure your sinuses will thank you someday for their um, for their Oscar. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. So
Good luck to them.
I hope that the next batch of Oscar movies I end up getting to are at least not boring. I understand you had a little bit of a boring holiday entertainment experience of your own. You're going to see a new type of theater. Tell me what is no theater?
Yeah, yeah. So perfect segue. I mean, we're just talking about sort of sitting at a theater show, being bored for a couple hours, and I'm a I like to go to the theater when I can afford it. Most of the time, it's $200-300 per person, and in America, sort of most of Europe, it's just too expensive to go to see anything. But I was able to get some tickets for a no theater, and it's not spelled no as in yes and no. It's spelled NOH, so it's no theater. It's some type of Japanese theater, and it's sort of their equivalent to ancient Greek theater, essentially. So you have like a chorus of people. You got a couple people playing some drums and like a flute kind of thing, and then you have the characters. Um, so little backstory here. I had always wanted to see one of these shows because I had heard a lot about them, and it's sort of like you whenever you think of sort of the music of the East or the sort of the Orient, if that's still an acceptable term,
I don't think it has
you
been
think
for
of
decades, but yeah, go ahead.
for, for since the 60s. Okay, when you think of music from let's say Asia, East Asia generally, you think of sort of like the flute and sort of like the wood, the knocking on the wood sound, and that
Yeah.
it had all that. So I was like, all right, this will be interesting. So I booked tickets. Um, I booked tickets, and then they tell me, oh, by the way, it's not in English. And I was like, well, I already paid for this, so I'm
Wait,
probably not going to get a
did you think
refund.
it was in English?
So sometimes they have subtitles, and then sometimes they don't.
Oh,
So
okay. I see.
most of the time, yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, you know what? Let me just I couldn't book it online, so I had to just go in person. And then I was like, oh, great, there's a show. I got tickets. Oh, by the way, is it in English? No, it's not in English. So I get this sort of little cue card with maybe about 5 scenes on it. And so I'm thinking like, oh, okay, you know what? I got the synopsis. I'll read about it on Wikipedia. I'll be able to sort of follow it online. It'll be fun, you know. It'll be like watching, I don't know, like a ballet or like a mime show or something, you know,
Yeah.
something where
Well, so
interpretive, you know.
what was the when you're looking at the scenes on your little card? Like, what was the broad arc of the show?
Yeah, so it's a famous no play. It's about two. Okay, this is me and the person I went to see it with were a little bit like, you know, I guess the morality of sort of 1,000 years ago is just sort of quite different from today.
Were they
This
they were problematic? They
well,
weren't very
a little
PC?
weird, but no, no, not necessarily not PC. Just sort of like a little like, you know, in the modern age, you might be like, that's a little strange. But the synopsis of the show is that there's two sisters, and they fall in love with a nobleman. They both fall in love with him,
Mm.
and they both love him. And there's no sort of like she loves him and he doesn't like me. So they're sort of all in on it together. And then the nobleman, I guess, passes away, and then the sisters pass away, but then they become ghosts. And then at the end of the play, some sort of Buddhist monk releases them, and then they find peace. Um, so, anyways, so
All right.
so the fact that they're sisters in a sort of love triangle situation kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but whatever, it's okay. I mean, I guess that was what they did back in the day. But anyway, so watching the show, thinking to myself, okay, you know, I'm ready to buckle down here. Uh, this is only going to be probably 2 hours, and then I'll go get some coffee or some food after, you know. So even if it's terrible, I have a consolation prize, you know, getting a nice cappuccino or whatever. Um, I'm late to the theater by 3 minutes. I'm thinking, oh my God, they're not going to let me in. I could not have been more wrong. I was let in. They escorted me to my seat. I wasn't even there for the performance starting. I was there for somebody talking about the performance um, in a language I don't speak. And I was thinking, okay, well, you know what? It's probably an introduction to the show. It'll
Yeah.
be 5, 10 minutes. It's 25 minutes. I'm looking at my watch. I'm thinking, you know what? It's been a while. I don't know how long the show is going to be. It's been 35 minutes. They're still talking, the same two people. And people in the audience are taking notes about what they're saying. So I don't know how important it was, but I was like, wow, this is, you know, I'm either missing all of the context for the show, or they're saying some mind boggling things about how the show's going to be. And so I felt a little disappointed. 47 minutes later, there's applause, you know, finally they wrap it up. And I'm like, good grief. Like, this is probably about as long as the play. And then that's where I was wrong on the second time. So, so then they finally start the play about an hour after this person had been, you know, discussing it, giving a little introduction. Um, and then the play starts. Um, you know that scene, that famous scene in the movie Lost in Translation, where the Japanese director will be sort of speaking to Bill Murray's character for about 3 minutes, and then the translator will say, "Can you just do it softer?" And then
Yeah.
Bill
And
Murray's sort of
I
like,
think he
"Was
said more.
is that everything?"
Yeah. It
Yeah,
sounded
I
like
think
a
he
lot
said,
more. Yeah.
yeah, he said a lot more. You know, I feel like there was a lot more in that could have been sort of distilled down. That was how it felt having my synopsis card of the show, because I'm just sitting there watching the show, and it's interesting, but it's going very slowly. I It's been about 30 or 40 minutes, and there's 5 scenes, and it doesn't even seem like they've made it to the second scene yet. So I'm starting to sweat it. I'm thinking, I've been here for an hour to listen to somebody talk about the show. The show has started. It's been about 30 something minutes, and it's only the first scene. Like, I could be here literally all day long. Like, I could be here until 11 o'clock at night. So I'm starting to kind of panic, because I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't expect this sort of time commitment. And then,
What's the audience like at these things? Are they like formal? Are they dressed up in, you know, suits and dresses and things?
Yeah, actually, so I didn't really, I wasn't wearing a tuxedo or anything, but I wore a collared shirt and I don't know, pants as you do. And
Yeah, I would hope
so
you're wearing pants. You wear a
yeah,
collared shirt and basketball shorts.
yeah, the classic American combination. But
We
yeah,
call
so
this
I
the
was I was
Sandler.
yeah, it wasn't sweatpants, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So,
Okay.
that's already a big culture tip of the hat from me, an American, to the local society. But anyway, so people are dressed up. People are dressed up traditionally in their kimonos. Some guys are wearing the whole thing. They have sort of the samurai style ponytail. I'm like, this is pretty cool. The audience is primarily older people, and then a group of what looks like maybe high school students that got dragged there on like their day off from school. So I'm thinking like, all right, well, there's a couple other youngish people here.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You saw the high school
It
students
rolls
and
around.
you said, I see a kindred spirit, and it's a bunch of 17-year-olds who are bored in the corner.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I was like, all right, well, if they're bored, this is their culture,
They're hip.
so then I don't feel as bad. Yeah, I feel like, hey, that was pretty boring, right? But of course I wouldn't say that. So, anyways, scene two, scene three. It's been about an hour and 15 minutes. The play is about halfway over, maybe. There's an intermission. I'm like, all right, this is great. Intermission lasts about 20 minutes for some reason. Intermissions are usually about 5-10 minutes.
But
20 minutes.
20, I mean, if
I
it's
could have gone.
a bunch of old people and they're all going to go to the bathroom, I can see how you
Yeah, I
have to go
suppose
from 5 to 20 because they take forever.
that is true. Yeah, but it's not that long to have to wait, frankly. Oh, well, actually, no, never mind. I take that back. Let me get to the end of the story here. We'll reassess that statement. But yeah, so 20 minutes, I could have gone and gotten a takeaway coffee and then come back to the theater. If I had still been a smoker, I could have smoked at least half a pack of cigarettes and then been back to the theater by the time the show restarted. And then, they're getting to scenes 3, 4, and 5. I'm excited because scene 5 is the final climactic scene, and it says that they had a frenzied dance. Okay, so I was like, all right,
Okay.
I can't wait to see this.
Well,
This will be the highlight of the show.
you're excited on two fronts, I imagine. One, because there's a frenzied dance, which is kind of interesting, and two,
Hmm.
because that means the show's almost over.
Yes, I have a dual excitement for both of those things. Probably an equal amount of excitement for both of those things. So, so they it. By the way, the show has been incredibly slow. Everything is spoke like this, and sort of like you hear like some sort of rhythmic, sort of clapping, sort of drum noises. There's like some sort of frantic flute playing occasionally. It's sort of like, if they didn't have the flute, it would literally just be drums and chanting. So
Yeah.
that guy's
It's,
guy's
that's
pulling his weight.
there's something kind of funny about that sinking feeling you get. Like, sometimes you're kind of in the mood to go along with a weird, slow, artsy thing that just moves at its
Totally.
own pace. And sometimes
Right.
you're not. Most of the time,
Yeah.
probably you're like, I don't know if I have the bandwidth for this today. My favorite example of this was I went to see that movie A Ghost Story with Casey Affleck and
Oh
Rooney,
yeah.
and I saw it in Alamo Draft House. So like not necessarily the artsy crowd all the time, right? And so we're maybe, I don't know, 25 minutes in, and Casey Affleck has died, and Rooney Mara eats a whole pie, and it's about a 5 minute long scene just of her eating this pie and then throwing up. And we're, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through this scene, and this couple was sitting in the row in front of me, and the woman turns to her boyfriend and she says, "Is this an art house movie?" And I was like, "Yep." She
Are you
realizes she's
bored
been
yet?
duped. Yeah, she knows she's not going to get more excited from here.
Yeah. Oh man. It's, that's when she realized, I don't know if these art house films are really something that I'm into. I think I
Right.
like saying that I've been to an art house film more than I actually liked the film itself. But yeah, same type of feeling. Um, so the show has been incredibly slow. Um, you have a lot of old people in the audience. The population of Japan is actually pretty elderly. I think only 3 out of 10 people is under the age of like 40. So so anyone under 40 me and high school students are sort of lumped into that, by the way. So it's not even like I'm looking at them like, hey, fellow kids. It's sort of like I guess we're the only ones that aren't 100 years old, right? Um, but anyway, so having said that, old people like to take naps. The
Mhm.
show has sort of a very lulling sound to it. Uh, the lady on my right has been asleep for an hour at least, and
Was she snoring?
she's no, she was very polite, polite
Okay.
sleeping. She wasn't snoring, so that was good. But I noticed she's asleep. I look over to the high school students at about scene four. They're all asleep. All six or seven of them are just literally like it looked like a scene at an airport, Tom. Like they're just sort of laying on top of each other. Like they're sort of like trying to get comfortable in these uncomfortable chairs. It was very funny. So I'm sort of like, wow, everybody's sort of checked out here. Um, we finally get to the frenzied dancing piece, and it is the word frenzied is just sort of a generous term because I would say that there was probably 12% more movement from the actors than there was before, and the music just sort of got a little bit louder. um, I mean, I wasn't expecting kick flips or like back flips or gymnastics or acrobatics, but when they say frenzied, I don't know if they were maybe maybe understood that word choice that well. So
Well,
yeah. Anyways,
presumably there's other interpretations of this, right? Same way that there's like weird, fast Shakespeareans, and then there's the like very traditional ones. So maybe there is an iteration that's more frenzied.
yeah, I mean, it could be. Maybe it's the more traditional and as opposed to the I don't know the more contemporary take on the play or whatever. But um, either way, they used the program for both when they gave it to me. So I don't know. I don't know what was happening there. So, the most frenzied it got was when the character sort of flipped open their fan and started fanning themselves quickly. And then I was like, this cannot be it. And then that was the point where it was it. I mean, the music sort of cut out. There was like maybe two or three final lines, and then the show ended. Everybody got up and applauded, and people started waking up again. Sort of. I look over at the high school students; they've all sort of like looked like they were dazed. It looked like some of them had been asleep for at least half of the performance. Um, and I got to that theater at 2:33, so 3 minutes after the show started. I left that theater at almost 7 p.m. And that was my experience with a very traditional Japanese theater. I went with my wife, and several times I told her later. I was like, "Hey, I got to confess, there was about 3 or 4 times where I was gonna turn to you and be like, 'Hey, can we just leave?' Because I don't know if I can take this." And then she said, "Actually, I was thinking about asking you the same thing, but
So you're both
but
just
like,
pretending to
yeah."
appreciate this culture that you don't really understand or have any stake in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's sort of like the art house movie thing. Sometimes you want to watch a really old movie that takes 3 hours to do something, and you're like, wow, that's great. And then
Yeah,
sometimes you're not in the right headspace.
right.
And then sometimes it just depends on the art itself. Sometimes you can watch something from like even the same director, and it's like it just is just miserable, and you're like, I need to turn this off and
Yeah.
find something else to watch.
You ever watch that movie Stalker, Tarkovsky?
Oh yeah, man,
Yeah,
some real hits and misses from that guy.
well, it's one of those movies where I'm like, I appreciate a lot of what's happening here, but it's so draining to watch 3 hours of just these sad, bald
Oh,
guys
I
being
know.
sad in the woods. And that's it.
Yeah, and I don't I love it in a movie where it'll just be quiet and you'll hear the crickets chirping for like even a solid 2 minutes, or even somebody just reading a book or eating a pie for 5 minutes. I mean, that's all fine. You can do that in a movie, and it can still be a really good movie. But if sort of the whole dynamic of the movie is like, hey, can we draw this out for as long as possible? Then it just sort of becomes a little bit too dull, I think.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
you hate to reduce it down to like, are they pretty enough? Right? We were just talking about, your Bradley Coopers versus your Paul Giamatti's. Paul Giamatti's
right.
funny, so like to me that clears the bar of like there's something inherently entertaining about whatever Paul Giamatti's doing, whether it's a comedy or not.
Right.
If they are, pretty people, if they're, these like model like actors, like Rooney Mara being sad is kind of just going to be a little bit more engaging than like generic old Russian guy being sad.
Of
Um,
course.
so is that kind? Maybe not, but like our attentions, our stupid monkey brains are what they are. And what I remember in Stalker was the whole time that's like they're in the the magical zone or whatever, where the laws of reality in theory don't apply, even though nothing that weird really happens. But the whole time they're trying to find this room at the center of the zone that will give you anything you want, right? Like this magical room. And so you're sort of like, well, okay, it's a long journey to get to the little magical piece at the end. And then they don't go into the room. And then the movie ends.
Oh, oh, and then you're infuriated about it, right? And then you Google like, what the fuck was the
Yeah.
ending of this
Did I
movie
miss?
all about?
Yeah.
And then people are like, well, it's open for interpretation. And you're like, that's the biggest cop out I've ever seen, because yeah, sure. Sometimes open for interpretation is a great way to end a movie. The triangle of sadness, the way they end that movie, for example. Is this person going to be killed? Are they going to be saved? That's great, because then it's open for your interpretation, and that kind of says something about you. But like, if you just say that because you didn't have the budget or like know how to show the magical little room, then you're sort of like, hey man, don't waste 3 hours of my day for this. You can't
Right.
do that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have that much time to be alive. Yeah,
That's what I say all the time. People are like, oh,
yeah,
you didn't like that Robert Pattinson Batman movie? And I'm like, I'm only going to be alive for so long. I don't have 3 hours for that. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that Tartovsky guy, because I remember one time I was very tired, and I had like sort of I woke up early, and I saw that the Solaris movie was on
Yeah.
YouTube for free. And I was like, you know what? This is like a classic of cinematography schools and stuff. I'll just check it out. And I watched the first 40 minutes and I was like, wow, this is definitely an art movie. I'm going to make another
Yes.
cup of coffee. And then I just sat there for, an hour and a half. It became, wow, this is pretty good. I'm going to make another cup of coffee. And then 2 hours in, I was like, wow, this is really a long haul here. I hope we get to the good bits. I probably drank like 7 cups of coffee during that movie. And after about 3 hours, I was like, all right, you know what? This was interesting and good. I still had to read about what I guess the movie was online.
Yeah. And
So I don't even know.
you've had 2 pots of coffee, and like that was
Yeah.
just the baseline to stay kind of awake.
Yeah, exactly. And I had just woken up, by the way. It was just fresh in the morning. But yeah, after seeing that movie, I was like, you know what? I don't think I need to see another Tarkovsky movie ever again. I think I understand exactly what that guy was all about,
Yeah.
and yeah, I appreciate it. But I just, I'd rather, again, going back to the monkey brain thing, I would rather watch an episode of a TLC show for 40 minutes and then just feel better about myself after I go do something else. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. These mopey Russian movies, again, like
Yeah.
they're good in the sense that, they're smart. They have interesting themes and all that. But I don't know. I don't know if people really love them or if they feel validated when they claim to be huge Tarkovsky fans.
I think it's just a snobbish thing, like, oh, I have the patience for this. It's like, okay, well, that's great. Do you like it? Of course I like it. Okay, well, what do you like about it? The pretension. It's like, yeah, of course, yes. I mean, that's, it's just sort of it's like, when you're 16, you're like, what is the most complicated type of music I can listen to, so that when my other friends ask me, you can be like, well, I like postmodernist classic jazz.
Yeah.
Then people will hopefully think I'm cool. I think it's
Yeah.
that
Or
same
like
mentality.
people who are like, oh, my favorite book is Finnegan's Wake, the one where you have to like learn the fake language to understand it. And like, then you'll think in the fake language for months after you read it. And like,
And you're like, that's a useless life skill.
yeah, like you can also just kind of like learn a real language for a little bit. I don't, or just read
Yeah.
something in your own. Like, I feel like there's other ways to do this other than like my book is so hard to read. I had to learn an entirely different language, and that makes me cool and smart.
it makes me intelligent because I have a knack for languages. It's like, you could have. It reminds me of that old person thing when that video game Guitar Hero came out. Somebody would be like, "Yeah, I've logged about 4,000 hours in Guitar Hero," and you'd always hear sort of the boomer of the group be like, if you had learned the actual guitar, you'd probably be able to play like classical musical pieces at this point. You'd probably be a very good guitarist. I feel like it's that same way with learning sort of fake book languages and sort of like lores of different things, like Star Wars lore.
Well, I guess
It's just
it's not like I have a problem. Like if you just like that, that's just fun for you. Then by all means, do whatever you got to do. Whatever
totally,
gets you through the
yeah,
day, keeps you happy. It's when it turns
of
into the
course,
I'm a snob and look
it's your
how cool
hobby.
I am. Here's my stupid nerd obsession. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, great, good for you.
yeah. There's a difference between having a hobby for yourself and just being like, what, I like this. This is my thing. Versus like, I like this because I like how other people think about me when I'm doing this. Sort of like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
big difference between those two, I think.
yeah. It's to give a real boomer take here. I wonder how much things have changed when the nerds became the bullies. Right, like there was a point when if you were reading Iron Man comics, you would get picked on and ridiculed. And now, if you
Mhm.
don't like Iron Man, then the nerds pick on you and try to bully you into being like, "Well, you just hate fun. You don't like entertainment. You only like." They would basically accuse me of being the Finnegan's Wake fan I just complained about. Whereas maybe we need a couple bullies here and there. I don't know.
Yeah, bring back bullying. That's definitely a good a good take.
My
Bring back
2024
bullying.
platform. We're gonna
Yeah,
we're gonna take things back from the nerds.
yeah, I like that. Another thing that's kind of funny is that as nerddom has become basically the mainstream now, you get people that are like, actually, in episode 13, he didn't go to the planet Zarakis. He went to the planet Aragon. And then it's like, okay, yeah, so what you said about this character is irrelevant. And you're like, well, I know, but I'm just watching these movies. I'm just watching
Yeah.
this
You're
for
like,
entertainment.
if you
I don't
think
live in that world.
if you think that the Scarlet Witch is underdeveloped in the Doctor Strange and the Multitude of Madness, that's because you didn't pay enough attention to episode 7 of WandaVision.
Yeah.
Like,
Actually,
okay,
it's
yep,
funny. I had
you got me.
exactly. It's funny. I have a couple coworkers, and they're big Star Wars people, and so occasionally they'll bust out the Star Wars trivia to each other whenever we got a sort of a lull in a meeting or something. And one of them said like, "Hey, so who was the first person to kill Darth Maul?" I was like, oh, "Okay, Darth Maul. That was those old Star Wars movies from the
Yeah.
2000s."
Liam Neeson, I
And
believe, kills him, right? Or
yeah, that's
was
what
you
I thought.
were Ewan McGregor maybe?
No, so it's neither of those guys. It's apparently some other guy on some other island that in episode 15 of the Mandalorian did this or that thing, and I'm just like, you know what? Like, at what point does this just become like a like I know more than you do competition? It's sort of like the nerds have now started sort of turned on each other, and instead of having like a mutual like appreciation for like, what, we both like Star Wars, right? I guess you know more about it than me. It's sort of become like well, you don't know your stuff. Can you even call yourself a real fan? It's like, okay, guys, we don't really, sort of, it,
Well,
it would it would be good to bring back a little bit of bullying because the nerds have started bullying themselves out of natural selection. So I don't know if maybe
what
that's
this
what needed to
what I was gonna say
happen
is like
either.
there's a difference between, like J.R.R. Tolkien just wrote thousands and thousands of pages of lore for Middle Earth or whatever. And so like
Right.
you're parsing through what he came up with in that situation, which is nerdy for sure, but I think a little different than Star Wars, which has the original movies. It's got like those Clone Wars series. It's got all those extended universe books. It's got all these other spin-offs now. And they're almost none of them are really related to George Lucas at this point. So it's just like, the fan fiction has become official. And really what that makes me think of is you think about like the Protestants versus the Lutherans, or the Catholics, they got
Yeah.
this wrong. Like we're
The
all just
30 years war.
yeah,
30,
right.
30
It's just
years war in Europe.
Yeah, the religion of today is just our Star Wars factions, I think.
Yeah, it's actually funny. For some reason, this triggered a memory that I had. One time I was sort of like a, I don't know, maybe a 12-year-old kid, and I had just seen my first Star Wars. And I remember being like, oh, I get all the references now. I'm a man of culture, pop culture and sophistication. So I was at a China buffet with my family, and we see these like three or four like sort of fat, overweight guys. One of them had very nice hair and sort of Qui-Gon Jinn, sort of like Liam Neeson in the Star Wars movies, ponytail,
Mhm.
and they come in fully dressed like Star Wars characters to the China buffet, and I'm thinking like, oh, I recognize that because I just watched those movies. So somehow I struck up a conversation with some of those guys, and they basically were trying to, I think, indoctrinate me into their cult. They believed that Star Wars was actually somewhat real and some sort of alternate timeline, that the Force was all real. And by the end of it, they gave me a business card and they're like, hey, you and your family should come to our convention in San Diego every year or something. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll think about it. And then I was like, you know what? I don't think I can. I don't
This
think I
is
should pursue this.
so
Got a
they were
weird
doing
vibe.
this was like you said it was like 20 something years ago when that happened.
Yeah, this is probably like
15 years ago.
2000 and like nine something
So
maybe.
what's hilarious is I think it probably tracks along with the questions of authority within Christianity too, right? Where like now their
Yeah,
religion has been bought by Disney, which is kind of like we need to split from the Vatican because we believe
yeah.
that the authority is actually George
The
Lucas.
schism,
Yeah,
the
right.
great schism, the Orthodox and the Catholic schism. Yeah,
We don't
it's
respect Bob
become
Iger as the ruler of our religion.
well. We don't accept the Nicene Creed of of Disney. We
Abrams.
profess our own creed. You're like, wow, this has really become an obsession for some people. I don't get it,
It is kind of
but yeah,
hilarious to think that like your religion just got bought by Disney for $4 billion.
yeah. It did seem like for those guys, it was essentially their like, what am I doing this weekend? Well, I'm not going to church, but I'm sure as hell going to put on my Jedi robes and and my sort of real slash fake imitation lightsaber belt, and then I'm gonna go to China buffet with the other guys
I'm
dressed
gonna
like me.
hang upside down and see how long it takes before I get enough midi chlorians for the lightsaber to fly into my hand.
I'm gonna paint my dog green again and pretend he's a little baby Yoda, strap him to my back. It's yeah, it is basically their church or their ideology. You waste enough time on that. It's basically your religion
And
at a certain point.
I'm pretty disconnected from Star Wars at this point. I mean, if I try to say my religion is Star Wars, is there like a moral core there, or is it just purely like I like to learn about this and watch the movies and play pretend?
Uh, Maybe a combination. I mean, there's definitely like the I live by the code of the Force or whatever, like be a
What is
kind Jedi to all, or I
is
don't know.
that
I'm
the
sure
code of the?
it's.
Do they have a code? I guess I don't really know.
I thought, well, actually, you know what? This makes sense, seeing as how, from what I remember, those Jedi guys were not accompanied by like sort of their wives and children or significant others in any capacity that I could see. But the only thing I remember from the Star Wars movies is that I guess the Jedi's weren't allowed to have um, relationships. So
Yeah.
no girlfriends, no date nights, no movies with the blankets, sort of. So that was the only code I sort of remember them
So that
having.
they're it's kind of there's not going to be I guess that culture does die off at a certain point because there's no
You would
procreation.
assume. You would assume, yeah, unless they indoctrinating their nephews or whoever else they can sort of pass along the nerddom to. Fortunately for them, it doesn't seem to have to be hereditary or genealogical in any way.
Yeah, do you think they have to recreate the twists of Star Wars, which is basically that everybody's a Skywalker, and so like they're just trying, they're like digging through their ancestry.com to try to figure out how they're a Skywalker and so's their sister.
Yeah, probably. Sort of digging through ancestry.com. You know, I was hoping that I had an uncle that was from off planet. Like, okay.
What percentage Hoth
Okay.
do you think I am?
Exactly. My ancestry DNA didn't identify any Hoth blood, even though I kept telling them, you know, I love wintertime. Cold weather agrees with me. It's embarrassing how much I do know about Star Wars, even though we just we just crapped on it for 20 minutes. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, if it becomes the main pop culture thing, you gotta kind of know some of it to get the references, and then that becomes kind of annoying. But then I guess that's just the world we live in, so
Well,
can't really do
yeah.
much about that.
I'm I guess I don't know what iteration we'd say we're on now. Like I've seen the original movies a handful of times, you know, that like every kid watches those a bunch, right? I saw the prequels I saw in theaters, and I think that's the only time I've seen any of those. So they're pretty fuzzy for me, but
Yeah.
I got a little bit of knowledge to draw from. I don't know that I could speak with any of the Disneyverse people and have any idea what they're talking about.
Those are the third wave people, you know? It's sort of like the Folgers instant coffee people versus like the, you know, the pour over sort of, you know, single origin espresso type of crowd. You know, you're just not going to get much overlap, I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Well, when the Star Wars Crusades begin, I don't know what side I have to be on, what side to be on. So I don't know. I gotta brush up, I guess.
Do you have to pick a side? Will they pillage my home if I don't
Yes. Yeah.
choose one of the
I think so.
choose a force?
Yes.
Oh man, choose your force.
We are the Jedi Empire, and we don't see any problem with that.
It's just a giant group of nerds, neckbeard
With
people.
plastic lightsabers that make the like noise.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, this one's real. It can cut through. It can cut through hot. It can cut through butter, but only if you let it sit for a while. You're like, okay, I don't know if it's don't
Uh,
know if it's real, but it's cool.
wow.
Very cool nonetheless.
Well, on that note, I guess I wish all of the Star Wars nerds a happy whatever the Christmas equivalent is for them. I guess I don't know that Jesus really factors into that. So a happy Skywalker birth or something.
A happy fourth. Let's say maybe the fourth be with you.
Yeah,
Happy January 4th.
every fourth, I guess, can just be some iteration of that. Why not?
Yeah. You know, honestly, it's gonna be pretty interesting living to be, you know, 80 or 90. I feel like January always has all the hot ticket days. So we're in January 4th, we're gonna see Skywalker conventions. January 6th, we'll see an annual sort of
The other new
yeah,
religion
the
celebrates
other
its
new
feast.
religion. Yeah. It seems to be, you know, how sort of a lot of religions came out of the Middle East. Maybe a lot of ideologies will peak in January. That'll just sort of be a trend that we'll see as we get older. Who knows? Food for thought.
Yeah. Well, we'll see about that. But yeah, all of you Star Wars people, you Star Wars freaks, I hope you have good holidays. And all the non-Star Wars freaks, also happy holidays from the Big Schmooze. And hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Enjoy and take it easy.